This video will act as an education on the Rock Act magazine and a celebration of their 1978 album, Real Life. Let's read out this information. Magazine were an English rock band formed in 1977 in Manchester in England by singer Howard Devoto and guitarist John McKeoch. After leaving the punk group Buzzcocks in early 1977, Devoto decided to create a more progressive and less traditional rock band. The original lineup of Magazine was composed of Devoto, McKeoch, Barry Adamson on bass, Bob Dickinson on keyboards, and Martin Jackson on drums. Their debut album, Real Life, 1978, was critically acclaimed and was one of the first post-punk albums. After releasing two other albums, Secondhand Daylight and The Correct Use of Soap, McKeoch left the band in 1980 to join Susie and the Banshees. Magazine released another studio album and disbanded in 1981. They reunited in 2009 for a UK tour with Noko on guitar. Magazine released an album of new material, Know Thyself, in October 2011, followed by a short UK tour. Unfortunately, Know Thyself I didn't think was very good. Noko, he's like a odd character. He's played with a bunch of groups. Pete Shelley Group, The Cure, Apollo 440, Alvin the Aardvark, odd things. Anyway, Magazine and their original guitarist McKeoch have been cited as an influence by bands and musicians such as The Smiths, Radiohead, and John Frusciante. Devoto formed Magazine in Manchester shortly after he left Buzzcocks in early 1977. In April 1977, he met guitarist McKeoch, then an art student, and they began writing songs, some of which would appear on the first Magazine album. They then recruited Barry Adamson on bass, Bob Dickinson on keyboards, and Martin Jackson, previously of the Freshies, on drums, forming the first lineup of the band. After signing to Virgin Records, Magazine played their debut live gig at Rafters in Manchester on the 28th of October 1977. Motorcade co-writer Dickinson, whose background was in classical and avant-garde music, left shortly after several gigs in late 1977. In early 1978, the band released their first single, Shot by Both Sides, a song Magazine recorded as a quartet. It featured a guitar-based drum sound similar to punk rock. Shortly after the single's release, Dave Formula, who had played with a briefly successful 1960s rock band from Manchester called St. Louis Union, joined as keyboardist. Shot by Both Sides used a chord progression suggested by Pete Shelley, which was also used in the Buzzcocks track Lipstick. The Magazine single just missed the UK Top 40. The band, with Formula on keyboards, made its first major TV appearance on Top of the Pops in February 1978, performing the single. Pete Shelley, he's famous. He's the Buzzcocks member, just in case anyone was not aware. Following a British tour to promote their debut album, Real Life, which made the UK Top 30, Jackson left Magazine in late July. He was replaced briefly by Paul Spencer, who performed with the band for gigs across Europe and some television appearances, including the Old Grey Whistle Test, where they played Definitive Gaze. Spencer quit partway through the tour, joining the Speedometers. Shortly afterwards, he was replaced in October by John Doyle, who completed the Real Life promotional tour and remained in the band. Magazine's second album, Secondhand Daylight, was released in 1979, reaching the UK Top 40. The album featured a greater use of synthesizers. That same year, McKeoch, Adamson, and Formula joined electronic project Visage, recording and releasing the single Tar. After the release of Secondhand Daylight, Devoto decided to change producers. He chose Martin Hannett, who produced their next album, The Correct Use of Soap. Martin Hannett's most famous for producing Joy Division, of course. Released the following year and again making the top 30. Following its release, McKeoch decided to leave the band. Tired of Magazine's low sales and their less guitar-oriented songs, he soon joined Susie and the Banshees. To replace him, the band hired Robin Simon, who had been in Ultravox and Neo. I'm not as familiar with Neo. Okay. The lineup toured across Europe and Australia. Oh, that would have been wild. Recording their next release, then the live album Play. I haven't listened to that album as much. Maybe it'll be good. It ought to be really good. Simon made some initial recordings and rehearsals for what would be the next Magazine album, including co-writing the song So Lucky, but he left the band before the album was released so that he could record the John Foxx solo album The Garden. Oh, that's good stuff. Fair enough. Again, without a guitarist, Devoto called in his former college friend at Bolton, Ben Mandelson, a former Amazor Blades member, one of the early British punk rock groups, as chronicled in Henrik Paulson's book 77 from Brighton. Cool. This lineup completed the 1981 recording of the band's fourth studio album, Magic Murder and the Weather. It's a pretty good album in my opinion, but the weakest of the four. But Devoto quit that May, months before its release, and the remaining members decided to disband. I guess you may as well. A year later, after the fact, the first Magazine compilation was released. Adamson continued collaborating with Visage and also began to work with Shelley, The Birthday Party, and Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. Jackson later played with the Chameleons, Swing Out Sister, and the Durruti Column. Well, that's good stuff, especially with the Chameleons in the Durruti Column. Hell yes. Yeah, I guess he very briefly replaced John Lever as a drummer in the Chameleons in 83 or so. Odd circumstances. Formula continued as a member of Visage and joined Ludus, and Mandelson joined the Mekons. The Mekons are good stuff. Ludus I'm not as familiar with. Influenced the Smiths. Yeah, I've got to spend more time with them. I think I've heard some of that stuff before. Anyway, Doyle joined the Armoury Show in Scotland in 1983. It's another band I need to probably explore more of, which also featured McGeoch. The latter later played guitar for Public Image Limited. You know, here's the thing with Public Image Limited. Album 2's genius, Album 3 is genius, everything else is a disappointment. First album's cringe, let's be honest. After a brief solo outing, it was like religion stuff. It's just one of John Lydon's. That's a more juvenile album than Nevermind the Bollocks, frankly. After a brief solo outing and 2 albums of Luxuria, another group I ought to explore maybe a bit more, Devoto quit music to become a photo archivist until a new collaboration with Shelley produced the Buzzkunst album in 2002. Okay, I might listen to that at one point. McGeoch died in 2004, aged 48. Damn, that's not that old. The Radiohead guitarist Johnny Greenwood named McGeoch his biggest guitar influence and said that Magazine's songwriting informs so much of what we do. Radiohead performed a cover of Shot by Both Sides in 2000. Johnny Marr of The Smiths cited Magazine as an influence, particularly McGeoch's guitar work. Morrissey covered a song from Under the Floorboards as a B-side to his 2006 single The Youngest Was the Most Loved. Floorboards is also covered by My Friend the Chocolate Cake on their 1994 album Brood. MGMT played a version of Burst on tour in 2011. Oh, MGMT, you weren't worthy of that. Lolita Pop recorded a cover of a song from Under the Floorboards on 1989's Love Poison. Half Man, Half Biscuit have performed live covers of a number of Magazine songs. The Light Pours Out of Me was covered by several acts, including Peter Murphy, the great Peter Murphy, Ministry, The Mission, Sleep Chamber, and Zero Boys. Which one's The Mission again? I'll look that up. The band No Fun at All did a cover of Shot by Both Sides on their record, and now for something completely different. Man's Son covered Shot by Both Sides for a John Peel session. Duff McKagan cited, that's the Guns N' Roses bassist, I believe, cited Real Life as an influence, particularly on tracks where a chorus effect is used. In April 2022, a biography of McGeoch, his life and his legacy was released on Omnibus Press. The Light Pours Out of Me, the authorized biography of John McGeoch, features recent interviews of guitarists and acts who admire McGeoch's work. The author of the biography met Johnny Greenwood, Johnny Marr, John Frusciante, and many other musicians, relatives and friends, including Susie Suze and Devoto. Now to discuss the album Real Life. The album was written over the preceding 1978, by the band, with Howard Devoto providing all of the lyrics. The 2 earliest songs, Shot by Both Sides and The Light Pours Out of Me, were co-written with Devoto's former Buzzcocks bandmate Pete Shelley. The majority of the material on the album was written by Devoto in collaboration with guitarist and founding member John McGeoch. Motorcade was co-written with the group's keyboardist, the classically trained composer Bob Dickinson, who played with the group in mid-1977 before being dismissed without warning at a meeting convened by Devoto in November of that year. Dickinson has cited the influence of Satie, Eric Satie, the great, interesting proto-ambient composer of sorts, on elements of the keyboard part in this song. In early January 1978, Dickinson was invited by Devoto to play for a few gigs, but he declined the offer due to his ongoing postgrad electronic music research at Keele University. The music for the album's final track, Parade, was written by Dickinson's replacement, Dave Formula, with bassist Barry Adamson. Definitive Gaze was recorded for a Peel session as Real Life on the 14th of February 1978. Having toured much of the album through 1977 and early 1978, the group's then lineup of Devoto, vocals, McGeoch, guitar and saxophone, Adamson, bass, Formula, keyboards, and Martin Jackson, drums, recorded the album in sessions using the Virgin Mobile and at Abbey Road Studios between March and April 1978. The album was produced and engineered by John Leckie. Oh, so no wonder Simple Minds are trying so hard. No Wonder Life in the Day sounds like a magazine knockoff. John Leckie's fault too. The original artwork and monoprint for the album was designed by Linda, Linder, also known as Linda Sterling. She's an interesting British artist, with photography by Adrian Boot. If you are not familiar with it yet, and you think you may enjoy it, do give a listen to Magazine's Real Life. If you enjoy Radiohead or The Smiths or just British guitar acts in general, I think you'll find a lot to enjoy in Magazine. Even if you're just a Beatles fan, check out Magazine. You may find it a fantastic application of that great legacy, if you're so inclined, of course.